This is YSM Sports Media. Want to thank you for all your love and support. Really appreciate it. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now and click the notification button for all future content.
All right, so speaking of Khabib, I gotta ask.
It's go talk time.
You know it is.
All right.
Who is the greatest MMA fighter of all time?
Can I present the argument before I give a name?
Go. And then I'm gonna direct that to you.
All right. So, I think the consistent three-headed monster right now is Khabib, GSP, and Jon Jones. GSP because his record is going to be hard to imitate in terms of who he fought. Jon Jones and Khabib because of them being undefeated, okay? We're going to start with Jon Jones.
I thought Jon Jones has a loss.
He has a loss due to a disqualification, and the rule had been in play for like a couple months. It wasn't even like
Okay.
so. It wasn't nothing like. And it was a hard one time. He didn't even get a real warning. It was like a hard one time. They told him to stop. That was it, and then it was a DQ because Matt Hamill couldn't continue. So it just was what it was. It's like if you whooping a guy's ass, you land a low kick by accident, and then they give you the loss for disqualification. It's like we all know what happened. Okay. So let's present the argument for Jon Jones. All right. He was been in the UFC since his 7th fight. Right. Came up, fought decent opponents at first. Was fighting decent opponents, Stephen Bonner, Jake O'Brien, who I'm sure you guys don't even know. He fought decent guys. Then he winded up having a streak that we all know him for, undefeated streak after the Matt Hamill disqualification, which I don't even count. He beat, guys like Brandon Vera. Then after the Shogun fight, he went on and had the best reign of any light heavyweight. The only thing you can say about his record is the guys he fought most of the time were guys who were way out of their prime. I know he gets this thing about beating 3 generations of fighters. It was like
Everybody was over like 32, 33 years old.
And had already been
and already been through wars with each other.
Yeah. So when you look at like Shogun, Vitor, and Lyoto, those are guys who all went right down the middleweight, and Chris Weidman beat all of them in better fashion than you did at light heavyweight. You feel me? You actually almost got submitted by Vitor. Then when you talk about your generation, I'm assuming they're speaking about people like Rashad Evans and people like that. Which you can that's still kind of a generation before.
Yeah, Rampage and I feel like Rampage and Rashad Evans and Shogun and Lyoto, that's that generation.
Yeah, like he beat Ryan Bader, but Ryan Bader was never like a real title contender in the UFC. So a lot of the guys he beat just weren't those guys. Or they had the name, they just weren't who they used to be. Especially after USADA came into play. When he fought guys who were younger in their prime, Gustafson, what's the kid? Dominic, Thiago Santos. We can say Glover Teixeira because he hit his prime late, but he was already an older dude. But I do give him credit because Glover at that point is like how he is now. He's just like, you can't walk through Glover. He did a good job beating Glover. So, but those 3 fights we fought guys who were younger, they were all debatable. And even against Thiago Santos, you lost on one of the judges' scorecards, and the other 2, most people feel like you lost. Okay, we can't bring up the second Gustafson because then he had been stopped a couple times, and he just wasn't the same Gustafson he was. Gustafson got a title shot off of beating Glover Teixeira, who wasn't doing anything at the time. That's how open the division was. Then it comes to the Daniel Cormier, which is his most accredited wins because, of course, Daniel Cormier has had a storied career afterwards. You popped once, and I don't want to hear nothing about the cocaine or this or that. You popped against Daniel Cormier, and the first time you popped pretty much. I think it was both times he popped, right?
He popped both times.
One was for cocaine, the other one was for the tainted substance, the picograms.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
It is a hell of a drug. But either way, those are like, yes, you won those, but you won those with asterisks.
Yeah.
Okay? But he's been in there since 7th fight. He grew up in the UFC, and we watched him become who he was. GSP. And that was just coming from a wrestling background. Like, he had a decent wrestling background, but I believe he was wrestling out of New York just from junior high, not even college. So extremely impressive to come to the UFC, develop in the UFC against decent opponents, and have the run you had. Definitely contender for GOAT status. Nobody can argue that, right? Skill-wise. Next, we got GSP. GSP has been in the UFC since his 5th fight. And if you look at the people he fought, Cairo Parisian, Jason Mayhem Miller, Frank Trigg, all those guys have great careers or were title challenges out the guy. He was facing title contention caliber fighters straight out the gate with a karate background. He didn't have a background in anything. I'm saying he got his black belt when he was a teenager. He got a karate black belt when he was a teenager, whatnot. So, and he wasn't one of the biggest welterweights. He took a loss to Matt Hughes. That's the Matt Hughes loss and the Matt Serra loss are the big 2 things. What you got to remember about that is that he took the Matt Hughes loss, I believe it was the 7th or 8th fight of his career. From no background, you fought outside of you the greatest welterweight of all time. Like one of the greatest martial art MMA fighters of all time, and at that point, the greatest welterweight of all time. In his prime, and you were winning that fight up until the point where you just kind of made that mistake. All right? You come back, beat Josh Koscheck, BJ Penn, couple good guys, right? Destroy Matt Hughes. This is all within his first 15 or 16 fights. All right? Then doesn't train for Matt Serra, and then, of course, he gets clipped by Matt Serra. Comes back, destroys everybody, destroys Matt Serra, and then afterwards, literally beats every person you could think of. We hear people talking about clearing out divisions, but he really cleared out divisions. Like, he beat everybody. John Finch, when nobody wanted to fight John Finch, he was undefeated in the UFC. He beat Josh Koscheck twice. BJ Penn when he was an animal. He destroyed Matt Hughes the 2nd time. Smashed Sean Sher. Beat Carlos Condit. Beat everybody. Like, he beat everybody. All the great welterweights. And then, of course, the last one is the Johnny Hendricks one, which, I mean, I get it. He was a little bit more beat up at the end of the fight, but George has won fights against so many people and looks beat up afterwards. He still won the fight. You don't win the fight by having 2 big rounds. You win the fight by winning more rounds than your opponent or finishing them. You lost rounds 1, 3, and 5. All right? 3 and 5 being clear, 1 being somewhat debatable, but you got taken down and you backed up most of the time. Just is what it is. You lost on points. Takes, 4 years off, comes back and beats Michael Bisping in the prime of his career. The difference between Jon Jones and him is that he got 2 losses, but he fought everybody in their prime, and he's been in the UFC since his 5th fight with no background outside of karate. We moved to Khabib. Khabib didn't get into the UFC to his 16th fight. Already, there's a major difference between him and the other 2 contenders. He was already of a certain level by the time he got there. He was already a 2-time World Sambo champion. He had a very strong martial arts background, got there with 16 fights. The other 2 people have more fights in the UFC than I think he has damn near in his career damn near. The overwhelming majority. I think GSP has like 31 fights. And how much Khabib have?
29.
29. So not the whole thing, but it's like it's that close. Like, they already were champions on their historic runs in their first 16 fights. You were just getting into the UFC. The best guy you had beat for a while was Pat Healy, and who no one probably even knows, but he's like a 500 fighter too. And Michael Johnson, who's a 500 fighter. The reason Khabib gets his praise is because how dominant he looks. But it's also not about what your record is, it's who you fought. Now, to give Khabib credit, when he got to the level of fighting those guys, I was even on record doubting him. He went and proved he could do to those guys what he did to these guys. But you also have to question, if he was in there from his 6th fight, fighting world-class opponents, would he have a loss too? He didn't grow up in the UFC. If GSP or Jon Jones had came in having 16 fights, had competed on those type of world stages already, do you think they would have lost seeing what they were able to do growing up in the UFC? If they were already primed beforehand, what do you think they would have been able to do? You understand what I'm saying? That doesn't take anything away from Khabib. It's like you got to look at the full picture. Also, title defenses. He defended his title twice. No, twice. Was it 2 or 3 times? 3 times, I believe. Because Conor was the first defense, then it was Dustin, then Gaethje.
Yeah.
Okay, so because he won it against Ayala Quinton, but you won the title against Ayala Quinton, not against Al. I love Al, but you know he's not the person you win the title for. You fought Conor after he hadn't done MMA for 2 years. He still took a round from you. You beat Dustin Poirier, who you were kind of projected to kind of dog anyway. And Justin Gaethje was a virtuoso performance. I take nothing away from you. You've done everything right in your career. You just haven't done what they've done. You were primed to come over, and then you haven't had the runs they've had. So it's just hard for me to call you the GOAT. Now, what I can say is, if I put you and Jon Jones next to each other, I would edge you against Jon Jones because you fought more dominant against ranked opponents. I can say that. But to put you over GSP is just crazy to me.
All right, so you gave me a good build-up. Who's the GOAT?
I would have to say GSP. GSP has been in the UFC longer, fought everyone in their prime, dominated guys. Like everything they say about Khabib, we were saying about GSP in his prime when he was clearing out the division. We were like, who is he going to fight? You feel me? At a higher rate. People remember back then they was calling taking guys down and smashing them boring. Now people have become more skilled, so it's more exciting. They understand more what's going on, but that's what GSP was doing. He was taking guys down and battering them. He like stomped Matt Serra. He literally was standing up and side kicking him while he was balled up. Like that, he was on some real Philly shit with that one. Like I respect it. He stood over a man and kicked him in the side. We were like, boo, where's the blood? And now like Khabib takes a guy down and does this for 3 rounds. They're like, look at that master at work. Look at the master at work. Who has Khabib fought with a strong wrestling background outside of Abel Trujillo?
Gaethje has a strong wrestling background.
He had a strong wrestling background how long ago?
You asked me to. Who else?
Okay, so we can say Gaethje has a strong wrestling background. He fought 2 guys with strong wrestling backgrounds. No national champions, no Big Ten, no none of that. Who did? Actually, I think Gaethje might have had a national champion. I'm gonna check on that. But that was a very long time ago on a very different style.
I think he did.
But as you look at GSP, he fought Johnny Hendricks, who statistically at the time was best collegiate wrestler. He fought John Finch, who was an amazing wrestler. He fought Matt Hughes. He beat all the wrestlers at wrestling without a wrestling background in their prime. Like, it's hard. It's like everything you did, he did against better opponents with less to work with earlier in his career. But I would have to go GSP, then Khabib, then Jon Jones. I would have to put Khabib over Jon Jones.
I'm going to shift that question over to you, Albie.
All right, so
this man will say Anderson Silva.
Objectively, I'll give you my list.
Go ahead.
Basically the same. Not basically, it's exactly the same list. So GSP, Khabib, Jon Jones objectively, but fuck Jon Jones, Anderson Silva.
Can we throw some honorable mentions in there?
Go ahead, throw some honorable mentions.
I think, of course, Demetrius Johnson. His whole thing was his division wasn't proven enough. He didn't face who we perceive to be as killers. I believe they were very skilled fighters. Obviously, normally when you go down weight when there's less power, there seems to be more technique involved in almost every combat sport. But he has records that'll never be matched. Literally records that'll never be matched. He got Henry Cejudo.
Wait, I gotta stop.
Yeah.
I have a gripe.
Why?
I have a gripe with both of you. The father of MMA, the father of modern
Gracie?
day. Yes. How is he not on this list?
Okay, so if we look at Royce Gracie, right? He literally didn't fight nobody.
I'm saying that
if we talk about most important fighters, that's one thing.
Yeah.
The most impactful fighters. We're talking about the greatest fighter.
who's the most impactful fighter of all time?
The most impactful fighters.
Fighter of all
A
time.
fighter of all time has to be Royce Gracie. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. But to call him the greatest fighter, he fought two guys earlier on in his career that like remotely knew how to use the ground, Ken Shamrock and Sakuraba. He went to a draw against one and got the shit kicked out of him by the other.
Dan Severn, can Dan Severn go to the ground?
Huh?
Can Dan Severn?
He was a wrestler, but it wasn't like he understood submission grappling. It's a big difference. He wasn't a submission grappler. If it was like a Josh Barnett, then it'd be a different thing. Somebody that takes you down, doesn't like if I slam you right now and extend my arms and just hold you down, that's one thing. Second, you rotate your hips and armbar me, that went from a strong position to me. Like they didn't understand it back then. The second people started understanding it, you started seeing wrestlers who understood it take over. And then strikers who could stop the wrestlers take over. And that's just kind of how the cycle goes. So, but yeah, he's the most impactful, but come on, man. I mean, just look at him. He got ragdolled a couple times.
Who's the most impactful fighter ever?
Impactful fighter ever? Like, in my opinion? Or
I want you.
Talk heavy.
I want to say impactful ever for me would be Chuck Liddell because he got me into fighting.
Chuck Liddell's a strong second because it wasn't mainstream until you saw The Last Mohican dogging people running backwards dead with one shot. I put Chuck Liddell in his prime against any light heavyweight.
Real shit.
Put me on record saying that. John, because you had took one of them Jones on the chin.
This Chuck?
Clean one. Beard gut, Chuck.
Black toenails,
Black toenails with the mohawk, Chuck in one punch. How many people you have seen jog backwards, do this, and dead a grown man? We're not talking about hurt him. Like, I done seen people get hurt. I mean, dead a grown man going backwards. Like leaning backwards. Like, we're not talking about moving backwards, set your feet like how he did against Randy Couture. That was a clean shot. He was like, get off.
Since you want to bring that, I should bring up Forrest Griffin dead and him.
Huh?
Forrest Griffin dead and Chuck?
I mean, yeah.
Did Forrest Griffin what?
Forrest Griffin dead and Chuck.
Yeah, but Chuck, he was off the juice. Everybody was on the juice back then. Everybody was on the juice.
Royce Gracie was on juice.
Yeah, Royce Gracie was definitely on
Cam
juice.
Shamrock was definitely on juice.
He was the juice box.
Whoa! Don't disrespect Ken. Ken would never.
Yo, Ken was the first MMA superstar when he crossed over to WWE.
Yeah.
WWE.
I remember that. That was a big deal.
All right. Now, but look at him. He was juicing.
I challenge you. You look at his back. You can fucking draw constellations on that.
Look like coiled snakes with saggy skin. It don't make no sense, bro. He look like a jack snake that's shedding all the time.
But I got nothing against because everybody was literally doing it back then.
Yeah, everybody. I ain't mad at you. Somebody handed you something and was like, look, man, you can guarantee you be better than that guy.
Ken Shamrock, I feel like Ken Shamrock might have made it. It didn't quite go mainstream like Chuck Liddell did, but it took it to a different level.
Yeah.
Once Ken crossed over to WWE,
it would definitely be like
we finally heard UFC.
Royce, Ken, then you have to say Chuck, then you have to say Anderson Silva, and then GSP because he opened up the market and showed like fighters don't have to be these fucking Mohicans running backwards punching people with beer guts. Right. We can be clean dudes who are athletes. I think GSP was the first like professional athlete in MMA, like inside and out. Like he just brought a different. We weren't the meatheads anymore. Or what Bob Arum call us? The skin-headed white boys
that likes to roll around.
They like to roll around with each other. I was like, I didn't know I was skin-headed, bro. Didn't know that. He said it at the point when Rampage was light heavyweight champion, probably best known fighter in the world at the time. Yeah, which is hilarious that he said it.
Funny thing is that Rampage transitioned into a movie star. Rampage
transitioned into everybody's favorite uncle. Yeah, he got the craziest guy. I feel like Rampage right now.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.
No problem.